She's a witch, a man shouted from the crowd, his voice filled with hatred. The women who had once admired Aduke for her hairstyling skills began whispering amongst themselves. It must be true, one of them said. How else could she make her hair by herself? The villagers, now convinced that Aduke was a witch, were on the brink of taking drastic action. Once upon a time in a small village called Igbara, it was a kind of place where news traveled faster than the birds in the sky, and a new face never went unnoticed. So, when Aduke, a quiet and unassuming woman, moved into the village, her presence was quickly noted by all. Aduke wasn't just any woman, she was a professional hairstylist with hands that could create magic. Her skills went unnoticed until one fateful day when a neighbor, Awero, casually asked if Aduke could help her with her hair. Without much ado, Aduke agreed, and as soon as Awero's hair was done, it was as if the entire village had caught fire. Wow, your hair is so beautiful. The patterns are so neat. The women of Igbara marveled as they crowded around Awero, admiring the intricate patterns woven into her hair. Who made it? They asked. Their curiosity and admiration piqued. Awero, though flattered, grew tired of repeating the same words over and over again. It's Aduke, she just moved in, she replied. From that moment on, Aduke became the name on every woman's lips. Her house was soon flooded with women of all ages, eager to have their hair styled by the new sensation in town. Aduke's reputation spread like wildfire, and in no time, she became the most sought-after hairstylist in the village. Yet, despite the sudden attention, Aduke remained a mystery to the villagers, always keeping to herself, quietly weaving magic with her hands. Among those drawn to Aduke's newfound fame was a young, ambitious lady named Banke. She had always dreamed of becoming a hairstylist, and when she heard about Aduke's expertise, she knew she had found her golden opportunity. With hope and excitement bubbling inside her, she decided to approach Aduke and ask to be her apprentice. The sun was high in the sky when Banke finally gathered the courage to visit Aduke. She knocked on the door, and when Aduke opened it, Banke didn't waste time. Auntie Aduke, I've heard so much about your skills. Banke began, her voice full of admiration. I want to learn from you, please. Let me be your apprentice. But Aduke's response was not what Banke had expected. With a calm yet firm voice, Aduke replied, I only make hair. I don't teach people. Banke's face twisted in disbelief. Haha, what do you mean you only make hair and don't teach people? This is funny and strange. She laughed, thinking Aduke was joking. But when she saw Aduke's stern expression, the laughter died in her throat. Auntie, please. I'm serious. I want to learn. It's my dream. Despite Banker's pleas and the story of her long-held passion for hairstyling, Aduke remained unmoved. I said I don't teach. What's your problem? Please, leave this place, Aduke said, her tone final and unyielding. Banker left Aduke's house that day, her mind swelling with confusion. As she walked home, she couldn't stop thinking about Aduke's strange refusal. Is there something she's hiding, or why on earth would someone say they can't teach what they are so good at? Banker wondered. That night, Sleep eluded her. Banke was desperate. She needed to find a way to learn from Aduke. But how? She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The more she thought about it, the more convinced she became that Aduke was hiding something. The next day, Banke confided in three of her closest friends, and together they hatched a plan. If Aduke wouldn't teach Banke alone, maybe she would agree to teach all four of them. With a mixture of hope and determination, they approached Aduke one after the other. But to their dismay, Aduke's response was the same. "I don't teach," she said. The refusal left them even more baffled. As they walked away, their minds raced with questions. Why wouldn't Aduke teach them? Was there something sinister behind her reluctance? The seed of suspicion had been planted, and it began to grow in the minds of Banke and her friends. They decided to find out the truth no matter what it took. The villagers continued to flock to Aduke, who consistently delivered stunning hairstyles that left the women in the village feeling more beautiful than ever. Their husbands also couldn't help but admire their wives looking so beautiful, praising the neat and intricate designs that only Aduke could create. But as the months went by, a sense of unease began to creep into the hearts of some villagers. It started with Banke and her friends, who couldn't shake their curiosity about Aduke. How is it that she makes beautiful hair for us in this village, yet she's always wearing stunning styles herself without anyone plaiting her hair? Banke wondered aloud one evening. How does she do it? This simple question sparked a quiet storm of concern among the women in the village. Some dismissed it, insisting that they should mind their own business. As long as she keeps making us look good and our husbands happy, who cares how she does her hair? They argued. But others, like Banke and her friends, couldn't let it go. The mystery of Aduke's hair gnawed at them, growing into a topic of hushed conversations. There was something about it that didn't sit right. How could someone make such intricate styles on themselves without help? Determined to get to the bottom of it, Banke decided to take matters into her own hands. She befriended Awero, Aduke's housemate, and under the guise of wanting to learn by observation, she moved into their house. "Maybe if I watch her closely enough, I will learn something," Banke told her friend, her mind racing with possibilities. Awero, trusting Banke's intentions, allowed her to stay. But once inside, Banke's curiosity turned into an obsession. She began trailing Aduke around the house, trying to catch her in the act of styling her own hair. She would go close to Aduke's door, hoping to hear the faint rustle of hair being braided, or stand quietly by the window, her eyes fixed on Aduke's every move. But no matter how hard she tried, Banke found nothing. Aduke's hair was always perfect, yet there was never any sign of her doing it. It was as if the hairstyle itself, leaving Banke more puzzled than ever. Frustration bubbled within Banke, but she couldn't stop. The mystery of Aduke's hair became an itch she couldn't scratch, a question she couldn't answer. And as the days passed, her obsession only grew stronger. What was Aduke hiding? Why wouldn't she teach anyone? How did she keep her hair so flawless? As Banke's suspicions deepened, so did those of other villagers. The whispers grew louder, the unease more palpable, and in the quiet corners of the village, a storm was beginning to brew, one that would soon engulf the entire village in its wake. One night, something strange happened. It was already past midnight when Banker woke up to ease herself outside. The village was silent, the only sounds being the distant calls of animals and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. On her way back to the room, a strange feeling gripped her. Something urged her to look through Aduke's window. Slowly, she moved closer, her heart pounding in her chest as she slightly pushed the window open. What she saw made her blood run cold. There, in the dim light of the room, sat a figure with no head. The figure had a head placed between its laps, and it was using its hands to braid the hair on the severed head. The sight was horrifyingly surreal. Aduke, sitting there, plaited her hair all by herself in such a mysterious and unnatural way. Banker's shock was too much to contain. She let out a loud scream, a cry that pierced the night. But before the sound could reach anyone else, Aduke turned towards her and, with a wave of her hand, struck Banker with dumbness. In an instant, Banker's voice was gone, leaving her mute. Aduke then quickly returned to her human form, her head seamlessly back in place, her hair perfectly braided. She had thought she'd locked the window securely, not realizing that she had only closed it without using the lock. The next day, Awero noticed that something was terribly wrong with Banke. She had been unusually quiet all morning, not uttering a single word. Concerned, Awero tried to engage her in conversation, but Banke couldn't speak. Panic set in, and soon the entire village was buzzing with the news of Banker's sudden dumbness. The villagers gathered, trying everything they could to make Banker speak again, but nothing worked. They took her to every spiritualist they could find, hoping someone could break whatever curse had befallen her. But all their efforts were in vain. Banker remained mute, trapped in a new, terrifying reality. As the days passed, Banker grew desperate to communicate what she had seen that night. She tried to point to Aduke's window, hoping her friends would understand, but they couldn't make sense of her gestures. Her attempts to convey the horror she had witnessed only deepened their confusion. No one could comprehend the silent screams of the girl who had once been so full of life and laughter. And so, the mystery of Aduke deepened, with Banker's silence casting a dark shadow over the village. But the truth, as terrifying as it was, remained locked inside Banker's mind, where no one else could reach it. After much back and forth, Banker's friends, who knew about her spying on Aduke, grew furious. They blamed Aduke for her sudden dumbness. As tension in the village escalated, Banker's friends decided it was time to let out the truth. So they reported the case to the village youth. Upon hearing the truth, the angry youth stormed Aduke's house, dragging her out into the village square. They were determined to make her pay for what they believed she had done to Banker. "If you don't release Banker from the cage of dumbness, we will stone you," one of them shouted, as the others echoed the same. Aduke stood in their midst, silent, her eyes moving slowly across the faces of the enraged crowd. She said nothing, her expression unreadable. The villagers, growing more impatient, shoved her, demanding that she speak, but Aduke remained quiet, unmoved by their aggression. Just as the situation threatened to spiral out of control, some of the village elders arrived at the scene. They pushed through the crowd, commanding everyone to step back. The elders inquired about what was happening, and the villagers eagerly recounted the events leading to Banker's dumbness. One of the elders, an old man named Ajanaku, stepped forward. Ajanaku was no ordinary man. He was a respected seer with spiritual abilities that allowed him to see beyond the natural realm. His presence alone was enough to silence the crowd. He stared at Aduke for a long moment before pointing directly at her. "Speak now," Ajanaku commanded, his voice resonating with authority. To everyone's astonishment, Aduke's lips parted and she began to speak. "Yes, I made her dumb," she confessed, her voice steady. The villagers were shocked and their anger flared up once more. Some of them lunged forward, ready to attack Aduke, but the elders quickly intervened, holding them back. "Let the elders handle this," Ajanaku said, his voice calming the restless crowd. Banker sat on the ground, watching the drama unfold. She felt a wave of relief as Ajanaku turned to Aduke and commanded her again. "Release her tongue, now." Aduke fixed her gaze on Banke. With a subtle wave of her hand, she released the hold she had on Banke's speech. Within seconds, Banke felt her voice return. "Hey, ha, ha," Banke gasped, panic-stricken. The memory of what she had seen that night weighed heavily on her mind. She feared that revealing the truth might lead to something far worse. Ajanaku, sensing her hesitation, spoke firmly. "Banke, what did you see? Speak up now and have peace." With trembling lips, Banke began to narrate what had happened that night. I went out that midnight to ease myself," she started, her voice quivering. "Then I opened her window. I saw Aduke's head. It was on her lap, and she was braiding her own hair with her hands." The crowd gasped in disbelief. Murmurs and whispers filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. The villagers found it hard to comprehend what they had just heard. It seemed impossible, something out of a dark, twisted tale. "This can't be real," someone muttered. "She's lying," another villager insisted. "Silence," Ajanaku bellowed, his voice cutting through the noise like a knife. The crowd fell silent, all eyes on Aduke. "Is this true or not?" Ajanaku demanded, his eyes piercing into Aduke's. Aduke's response was calm, almost indifferent. "True," she said. The shock that followed was immediate. "She's a witch. Let's stone her," a man shouted from the crowd, his voice filled with hatred. The women who had once admired Aduke for her hairstyling skills began whispering amongst themselves. "It must be true," one of them said. "How else could she make her hair by herself?" The villagers, now convinced that Aduke was a witch, were on the brink of taking drastic action. The fear and anger in their hearts had been stoked to a dangerous level. But the elders, especially Ajanaku, stood firm, knowing that the situation could not be allowed to descend into chaos. As the angry villagers prepared to stone Aduke, Ajanaku raised his hand, commanding their attention. "Silence, everyone," he bellowed, his voice echoing across the village square. The crowd quieted down and Ajanaku stepped forward, his expression grave. "The elders have spoken, and this is our verdict," Ajanaku began, his voice steady. "We will not stone her to death. Instead, she will be banished from this village." The crowd reacted with a mix of emotions. Some villagers nodded in agreement, relieved that blood would not be spilled. Others grumbled in dissatisfaction, believing that Aduke deserved a harsher punishment. But the decision had been made. With grim determination, the villagers gathered around Aduke, and together they escorted her to the outskirts of the village. As they reached the village boundary, one of the elders stepped forward, his voice carrying a final warning. You are no longer welcome in this village. If you return, you will be executed on sight. Aduke stood silently, her face expressionless, as she gazed at the familiar faces that now looked at her with fear and suspicion. Without a word, she turned away from the village that had once been her home and walked into the dense forest beyond. Aduke was not broken. She had been through this before. The memory of her past resurfaced as she walked deeper into the forest. She had been banished from her home village for the same reason, accusations of witchcraft after being seen braiding her hair in the dead of night. She had thought that Igbara village might be different, but now she knew the truth. There was no place for someone like her in the midst of people who could never understand. As she ventured deeper into the forest, she finally came across a tranquil spot under a large ancient tree. The place seemed untouched by time, a peaceful haven far removed from the chaos of the village. This we do, Aduke murmured to herself as she sat beneath the tree, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. She knew that this time she would not try to integrate into any village again. There was no point in living among people who would always fear her. Over the next few days, Aduke began to build her new home. She gathered wood and palm fronds, carefully constructing a small hut beneath the protective canopy of the tree. It was a simple dwelling, but it was enough for her. As she walked, she found solace in the solitude of the forest, where no one could disturb her peace. Aduke accepted her fate. She chose to live alone, far away from the fear and ignorance of others. The forest became her sanctuary, a place where she could be herself without judgment or persecution. And so, Aduke lived out the rest of her days in the quiet embrace of the forest, where she found the peace that had always eluded her in the villages of men. If you like the story, kindly like it, drop a comment, and also subscribe for more interesting stories than this. See you in the next video. Goodbye.